More and more Americans, especially young Americans, seem to be favoring communism and socialism. You and I need to talk about this. I'm Marcus Peter. In January of this year, an article was put out by US News, and it was called, "Why is Gen Z Embracing Socialism?" The subtitle of the article is "Trendy Campus Slogans Ignore the Oppression, Suffering, and Slaughter by Communist Regimes, and It's Time to Get Real About History." That, my friends, is where I want to take this commentary. It is time to get real about history, and this bothers me greatly. But let's diagnose the problem. An organization called the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, in their 2020 annual report, so at the time of this video, it's about 5 years ago now, 49% of Gen Z and 47% of millennials view socialism favorably compared to 40% of all Americans.
In your opinion, is socialism a good thing or a bad thing?
I mean, I think people kind of throw that word around to try to scare you, but if helping people is socialism, then I'm for it.
It could really benefit our country in the future.
I think it's a good idea.
Socialism as a concept, as a philosophy is good. I think that it's got a bad rep.
Trying to spread the wealth is definitely a good thing in America, and it's definitely a thing that's needed.
First of all, the fact that the number is that high for all Americans is bad enough, 40%. But YouGov and Axios in 2019 published this statement. 7 in 10 millennials, so 70%, say they are likely to vote for a socialist candidate, while half of Generation Z, 50% of them, say the same. Pew Research in September of 2022 said about a third of Americans under the age of 30 have a positive view of socialism, compared with 28% among those who are aged 30 to 49, and there's further statistics there. Newsweek, May 2023, more than half of Gen Z and millennials want a complete overhaul or major change to America's economic system, with socialism increasingly viewed as a desirable alternative.
Do you have a positive reaction to socialism or a negative one?
I'd say a more positive one. I'm definitely more open to it.
We should have a standard of living for all people. Okay. Just by default, that should just be available.
If we did it democratically, then we could really incorporate socialism.
Like, it definitely seems like a more feasible option, and it could help more people. Like, just as a broad term, it could help more people.
Now, some of you might be thinking, well, what's wrong with socialism, Marcus? I agree. No. If you actually think that you haven't cracked a history book enough, here's the problem. Socialism argues that all property ought to be owned by the state, all wealth ought to be given to the state, and the state decides who gets what willingly. And so the premise here is that everyone will receive equally. You've got a couple of moral problems at play. You are presuming complete moral uprightness on the part of the government, because the moment they receive all that wealth, you're presuming they're not going to be tempted in any way in their fallen human nature, and they will distribute this wealth completely equally. There's never been a case throughout history where that has happened. But you're also presuming virtue on the part of the people completely. You're saying that if I give everyone a living wage, whether or not they work for it, everyone will then be more motivated to work for it. That's never been the case as well. In fact, socialism as an economic system, communism as a political system, have throughout history, ever since the first Soviet regime under Lenin, it has killed human ingenuity. It has destroyed human innovation. It has completely massacred human dignity and brought about the tremendous loss of human life. All of this is factual, and I'm going to prove this to you. Hayek, in his book, The Road to Serfdom, wrote, this is Friedrich Hayek, "What our generation has forgotten is that the system of private property is the most important guarantee of freedom, not only for those who own property, but scarcely less for those who do not." This was in 1944, by the way. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who escaped Soviet Russia, wrote in A World Split Apart, this was his Harvard commencement address in 1978, he said, "Socialism of any type and shade leads to a total destruction of the human spirit and to a leveling of mankind into death." Ludwig von Mises, in his book Socialism, this was in 1922, an economic and sociological analysis, said socialism promises prosperity, delivers poverty. It promises equality, institutes slavery. It preaches morality, but is in fact destructive to the social order. Mind you, these are intelligent men who know what they're talking about. So what do we understand from this? Socialism, wherever it's been enacted, and communism as a political regime, is destructive to freedom. It is harmful to personal dignity, fatal to the human spirit, economically unworkable, and simply morally unjustifiable. The first communist socialist regime in history established en masse was in 1922 after the Bolshevik Revolution that took place in 1917. And ever since then, to this day, over 100 million people have been killed globally in the name of socialism. And before you say, well, capitalism has that much of a massacre as well, actually no. Take a look at how many people have been killed in the name of the economic system that is capitalism. And it's nowhere near, it's a bare pittance. Now, not every human life massacred is still infinitely valuable. Don't get me wrong. But socialism has numerically been demonstrable to destroy human persons. What do our founding fathers have to say about this? Thomas Jefferson, in his letter to Joseph Milligan, this was in 1816, he said, "To take from one because it is thought that his own industry and that of his fathers has acquired too much, in order to spare to others, or whose fathers have not exercised equal industry and skill, is to violate arbitrarily the first principle of association, the guarantee to everyone of a free exercise of his industry and the fruits acquired by it." What does this mean? In the thought of the founding fathers, if you want a communist socialist regime, you have to leave the United States. I'm making this very clear. The United States is never, ever going to be a communist socialist regime. John Adams, property is a sure right of mankind as a real liberty. Winston Churchill, the inherent value of socialism is the equal sharing of what? Miseries. And I can go on and on. What's the Catholic response here? Pope Pius XI in Quadragesimo Anno said, "Socialism, whether considered as a doctrine or a historical fact or as a movement, if it really remains socialism, even after it has yielded to truth and justice on points non-essential, cannot be reconciled with the teachings of the Catholic Church." This, my friends, is where we ought to stand. Pick up your history books and you will see everywhere communism and socialism have gone, absolutist regimes follow, the dignity of the human person gets destroyed, economic prosperity dies, and blood is shed in the name of the establishment of these regimes. I've done videos to this effect before, and I speak about this on Ave Maria in the afternoon. We who live in the free West have an obligation to uphold the dignity of the human person, the liberty of the human person, and the right to private property ownership and individual innovation, ingenuity, and industry. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Marcus Peter.